Okay, so um, good morning, everybody. It's good to see everyone today. And our portion this week is VaYera, and it begins on page 99. Oops, I don't know why you can't see that. Yeah, it's whatever with the background. 99 in the Eitz Chaim, and what I really want to look at is starting with chapter 19 on page 104. Chapter 19 on page 104, starting with the third Aliyah. And I tell you, I was thinking about this in what I wanted to talk about today. And I remember quite clearly, I went to day school my whole education, except for seventh grade. I was in public school in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and fifth grade I was in public school in Ashkelon, Israel. But otherwise, K through 12, I was in day school. In fourth grade, we were learning the book of Genesis with Rashi. I still remember the teacher, may she rest in peace, her daughter and son-in-law, friends of ours, who he's a rabbi. They've made Aliyah. Anyway, I remember clearly her and the book we used, the edition of Bereshit that we were using with Rashi and studying. And this is not a chapter that we would study because of the disturbing events that take place here. So the context, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. The context here is that Abraham was at the start of VaYera in chapter 18. Abraham is sitting in front of his tent in the heat of the day, and he sees people coming. And he gets up to greet them, to welcome them, to provide some respite for them as they're traveling in the desert. It's three angels. The rabbis make have a lot of midrash about why it's three angels. The rabbis say that every angel that comes down to earth from God has one mission and one mission only. So one of the three angels' job, according to the rabbis, one of the three angels' job was to inform Abraham and Sarah that in a year's time she's going to give birth to a son. And the other two, their job is to go next, what we're going to read about in chapter 19 in just a moment. So we have the whole scene then of these angels with Abraham and Sarah, telling them that in a year's time they're going to have a child, and then there's also God tells Abraham that that God is about to destroy the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. And Abraham has this famous argument with God. What if there are 50 righteous people? What if 45, 40, 30, 20, 10? And God agrees to the decrease in the minimum amount of righteous people found in the towns. So we understand Abraham's advocacy and for the righteous and fighting, being willing to argue with God for the sake of righteousness. And so now we're on chapter 19. So chapter 18 ended, what if 10 should be found there? And God answered, I will not destroy for the sake of the 10. When the Lord had finished speaking to Abraham, God departed, and Abraham returned to his place. Okay, so now chapter 19 begins. Vayavo'u shnei hamalachim Sodoma ba'erev, velot yoshev b'sha'ar Sodom, vayar lot vayakom likratam vayishtachu apayim arza. So two, two of the angels came to Sodom in the evening. So this is a hint as to why each angel has a mission. Because at the start of chapter 18, in verse 2 on page 99, it says, "Vayisa einav vayar," Abraham raised his eyes and saw, "Vehine shlosha anashim," 3 men were approaching. Okay? Now it's 2. So the careful reader, like the rabbis, would wonder what happened to the 3rd. So that's why the rabbis say they teach their lesson. Each angel has only one mission to do. They can't multitask. They're not given more than one task. So that one angel then was in charge of informing Abraham and Sarah about the impending birth, and then went back to heaven, apparently. Okay, so 2 of the angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting at the gate of Sodom, and Lot saw and got up before them and bowed down prostrate. Okay? So, vayishtachu apayim artza, bowing low with his face to the ground, I would say he lay prostrate, just as a very formal kind of greeting. And this is meant to be in contrast to, we're supposed to compare and contrast how Abraham greeted the angels in chapter 18 to how Lot is greeting the angels here in chapter 19. Okay? So Abraham ran to meet the angels, and here Lot is just bowing down to the ground. Okay, so he's not running to greet them, but he's bowing down to the ground. Okay, so we just need to keep that. We're going to be very careful. We're going to be carefully reading this story to understand what the issues are. Vayomer, Hinei na Adonai, suru na el beit avdechem, velinu verachatzu raglechem, vehishkamtem v'halachtem ledarkechem, vayomru lo ki varachov nalin. So Lot says to them, Hinei na Adonai, please my lords. Okay, so the Adonai is plural. Adoni would be my lord. Adonai is my lords. Okay, but it's also the name of God. So he said, please my lords, turn aside to the house, your servant's house. That is my house, but he's being very formal here. Turn aside to my house and rest and wash your feet, and you'll get up tomorrow, that is, and you'll go on your way. Okay, so again, in the first story with Abraham, Abraham wants to wash their feet and offers them food and to have them stay with him. Okay, so Abraham ran to greet them. Abraham washed their feet. Here, Lot is offering, so it's still a generous offer. Stay with me, wash your feet, you'll get up tomorrow, and you'll continue on your journey. They said, no, we'll sleep in the street. It's like the Jewish mother joke. Come in, no, I'll sit in the dark. No, that's what comes to mind. Why they say they want to stay in the street is unusual, but perhaps we learn just by chance what protocol was in the ancient Near East and what people would do when they traveled from one city to another. Perhaps they did sleep in the street. Remember, it's the Middle East, and if it unlike the winter time where there might be a chance of rain, otherwise it's going to be dry and it'll be warm enough. So if we're talking about the land of Israel, yes, it can be, well, we're talking about Sodom, actually. So it's never cold at the Dead Sea, okay? It really isn't cold at the Dead Sea. So sleeping in a street could be an option. It's just that, what do you do for a blanket and a pillow? That kind of thing. And what are you going to do for food? Also, sleeping in a street. So, verse 3, let's see. So, he offers, come to my house, wash your feet, stay the night. They offer, no, we'll sleep in the street. 3, Vayiftsar bam ma'od, he pressed them a lot, like he really insisted. Vayasuru elav, and they came to him. Vayava'u el beito, and they came to his house. Vaya'as lahem mishteh umatzot afa vayochelu. So he made for them a feast. Mishteh could be, it's a feast. And he baked matzah, and they ate. Now, in the other story, he tells his servants and tells Sarah to bake cakes. Lushi va'asi ukot, go make cakes, and it describes actually the animals that were slaughtered in preparation for the feast of these 3 angels. Here it just says he made a feast and he baked matzah. Now the matzah, what did the matzah look like? That's a whole other question. Most scholars think that the matzah that the Torah talks about, the matzah here, the matzah of the story of the Exodus from Egypt, the matzah that was offered with some sacrifices described in the book of Leviticus, is not the matzah that we eat today on Passover. It's not that thin wafer cracker-like bread, but rather it was kind of like flatter than a pita, but it's still pliable. It's like it's more doughy than flat and crackery. But exactly what it was like and how it was made, we don't know. We don't have any recipes, I don't think, that have stayed from that time. So verse 4, so after the insisting, they agreed to stay and they have the feast. V'terem ishkavu, va'anshei ha'ir, anshei Sodom, nasabu al habayit, mina'ar va'ad zakein, kol ha'am mikatzeh. So before they went to sleep, or before they laid down, the people of the city, the people of Sodom, surrounded the house from youth to elderly. We're on page 105 in Eitz Chaim, reading now verse 4. Kol ha'am mikatzeh, all gathered around. Mikatzeh is on the edge, like outside the house. Okay, so the people of Sodom, from old to young, were gathered around Lot's house. Why? Verse 5. Vayikra'u el Lot, vayomru lo, ayeh ha'anashim, asher ba'u elecha halayla, hotziem eleinu v'neida'a otam. So they called out to Lot, and they said to him, where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us, and we shall know them. Now, that's the literal translation. We shall know them. The Eitz Chaim translators say that we may be intimate with them. Okay? Now, they probably are right. The scholars who came up with the English translation, this is the Jewish Publication Society translation, they know what they're talking about. And certainly earlier in the book of Genesis, when it talks about men knowing their wives, and then it says right after that, and she became pregnant and so was born, the knowing there, this neid'ah, or some other form of daled ayin hey, it means there, and only there. In modern Hebrew, it means to know. And it does not have the sexual connotation in modern Hebrew that it does in the Torah. Okay, so I just translated, so we shall know them. What does that mean exactly? Are we supposed to make the jump and say that it means let's be intimate with them? Certainly the rabbis understand that they're understanding the book of this story to be a story about the evil of the people of Sodom. And throughout rabbinic literature, the model for evil is the city of Sodom and its sister city of Gomorrah. But we don't learn about any stories that happen in Gomorrah. But Sodom, we know about Lot living there. We know about this story here. And so this story is supposed to serve as for the rabbis to understand the evil of the people of the city. So what we're learning the evil then is, this is what the people of the city do to people who dare to stop, outsiders dare to come by the city, right? We're going to have our way with them, okay? And that'll teach them to ever visit the city again, okay? Perhaps, okay? So now Lot's response. Vayetze aleihem Lot hapetcha, v'hadelet sagar acharav. So Lot went out to them at the door. So picture this. He's at the front door of his house. People are surrounding the house. And so he comes out the front door, v'hadelet sagar acharav, and he closed the door behind him, right? He wanted to protect the people inside the house from this mob. That's what essentially they are, to protect the insiders of the house from the mob. So what does he say to them? VaYomar, right? So they're chanting, bring out the men, bring out the men. So he comes out, he stands in front of his door is closed behind him, and VaYomar, and he said, Al na achai tareu. So he said, my brothers, don't be so evil, right? Don't demand such an evil thing of having your way, this homosexual act that you want to perform on these men. So what does he offer instead? What's less worse in Lot's eyes, right? So don't be this bad. Do this instead. And what's the this instead? Hine nadli shte vanot, asher lo yad'u ish, otziana eten alechem, va'asu lahen katov be'enechem, rak la'anashim ha'el al ta'asu davar, ki al kain ba'u b'tzel korati. So he says, here, I have two daughters who have not known a man. Or, this, if we're understanding knowing in this intimate, who have not been intimate with a man. I have two virgin daughters. Let me bring them out to you, and you can do with them as you please. Katov be'enechem, what's pleasing in your eyes. So as you please. But just don't do anything to these men, because they have come under the shade of my roof, or the shelter of my roof. So the morality here and the ethics that we're learning, certainly in our minds, in modern times, this is a bizarre choice that Lot says, that it's more important to protect the welfare of his visiting men than it is to protect the sexual status of his two virgin daughters. So why that is, I have no idea. And so we would only have to be able to understand what morality was at the time in the ancient Near East, and that protecting your visitors, this could be a thing in Arab culture, how important it is to protect and do whatever is necessary for people who you are being hospitable towards. That is a thing in Arab culture, but would Arabs make a choice between their guests and their own family members, and especially their women family members? So this is quite, and you see, there is absolutely no below-the-line commentary on this. So that says a lot too, that the below-the-line commentators, the editors of the below-the-line, decide, you know what, this is just too immoral to even bother with. There's no way to explain this. It would have been helpful to explain some of what was going on in society at the time, but there's really nothing here that could explain to us anything that's going on. So it leaves it up to us, and it seems like the editors of Eitz Chaim just want us to keep on reading, and we're not really supposed to. It's in the Torah, so it's in the Torah for a reason, and so we need to understand our reasoning here. And so let's continue with the story and perhaps try to figure out what's the point of having this story here. Okay, 9. So now the daughters understand that their father has been willing to throw them to this mob, and he thinks less of them than he thinks of the strangers that are in their house. Okay, so that's important for what happens later in the story, for these daughters to try to think about what their father might be thinking. Okay, so just keep that in mind. 9. Vayomru gesh hala vayomru ha'echad ba lagur vayishpot shafot ata nara lacha mehem vayiftsuru vayish belot meod vayikshu lishbor hadelet. Okay, I'm going to read the English translation. So he offered to bring out the women, and just said, on condition you do nothing to the men. And they said, come forward. It says stand back. Gesh hala means go away, move aside. And they said, one came here. So the one came here to live with us. It says here, the fellow came here as an alien. So I just want to be careful with reading the Hebrew. They said the one came to dwell. The lagur could mean that he's a stranger living among them. And that's what they're talking amongst themselves about Lot. Lot is the new guy. The new guy, as we learned in last week's portion, in which Abraham and Lot's shepherds were getting into disagreements about grazing land. And Lot decided that he'd go into the Dead Sea Valley area and settled there. So he's new to the area. How long he's been there, we don't know. The chronology is unclear. But after he moved there, then there was the war of the 5 kings against the 4 kings, and Abraham saved him because he was taken captive, and then he went back home. But how much time elapsed, we don't know. So he's still the new guy. So, there are communities that are like that. There are daughters of the American Revolution and everybody else who came after them, right? So, or the people who can claim ancestry to those who came on the Mayflower, and everybody else is new to America. So it depends on attitude that we have to people who are living among us. So, so these men are saying to each other, this one just came here recently, and already he acts as a judge, like he's making decisions, like he's telling us what to do. He's harboring these visitors, and he's offering his daughters instead. I'm just reading between the lines what kind of judgment he's doing. Like, how dare he say to us not to touch these men? What business of his is it to tell us what to do? Okay? Ata, now, nara lecha mehem. Now we'll deal worse with you than from them. And they pressed hard against Lot, against the man, against Lot, very much. And they approached, and it nearly broke down the door. So now, inside the house, they're hearing what's going on. So verse 10, Vayishlachu ha'anashim et yadam, the men cast out their hands, Vayaviu et Lot alehem habayata, and they brought Lot to them inside the house, ve'et hadelet sagaru, and they closed the door tight. Ve'et ha'anashim asher petach habayit, and the men who are at the doorway, like outside the door, hiku besan verim, they smote with nails. It says here blinding light, but okay, so they struck them with blinding light from mikaton va'ad gadol. So the blinding light, it says in the explanation here down below, a sudden immobilizing flash, blazing flash of light. I was confused with the word masmer. Masmer is a nail. Sanver, in my head, sounded like that. So they smote them with flashes of blinding light, kind of like maybe like a strobe light effect, from young to old. Vayilu limtso hapetach, and they were blinded; they couldn't find the entrance to the door. So now we know that the men have these supernatural powers, and they're able to bring. Like, it wasn't clear. Perhaps it wasn't clear to Lot who they were, just like it wasn't clear to Abraham who they were. The Torah tells us they were anashim, and here we're told the 2 angels went to Sodom and Gomorrah, but here they're called anashim again, people, men, as opposed to angels. So perhaps that means that's how Lot saw them, but then they did this magical thing, this supernatural thing. They're invoking God's power and be able to bring these flashes of light. And now verse 12, Vayomru ha'anashim el Lot. The men said to Lot, I think the angels, Od milacha po. No, it could be the men of the town said. Od milacha po. Chatan uvanecha uvnotecha. V'chol asher lacha ba'ir. Hotse min hamakom. So the men said to Lot, I think it's the angels, said to Lot, who else is with you here? Son-in-law, your sons, daughters, anyone else you have in the city, take them out from this place. So it's interesting. We don't know how big Lot's family is. We only know about these 2 daughters who are virgins. The angels, how do they not know? If they're the angels have the power to bring flashes of light. They don't know who else is in his family? that might be living in another house next door? How do they not know that? But they're saying, whoever's in your family, other sons-in-law, daughters, they're saying, you got to take them out of here. 13, ki mashchitim anachnu et hamakom hazeh, because we're going to destroy this place. Ki gadlat sa'akatam et penei Adonai, because the outcry has grown great to God. Vayeshalchenu Adonai lashachata, and God has sent us to destroy it. Vayetze Lot, vayedaber el chatanav, lokchei venotav. So Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-laws, the ones who had taken his daughters, or who had married his daughters. Vayomer, just a second. Vayomer, kumu tseu min hamakom hazeh. Get up, let's get out of this place. Ki mashchit Adonai et ha'ir, vayehi kemetzachek be'enei chatanav. And it was as if he was joking. That's how his sons-in-law saw it. Now, this is also fascinating. Again, comparing this to the first story in chapter 18 with Abraham and Sarah and the angels. There's metzachek in that story too. Sarah was laughing about the idea that she's going to be pregnant, and that's why the baby is going to be called Yitzchak. Here, the sons-in-law are laughing about the idea that the city is going to be destroyed. Okay, so both laughing about God's power. Sarah's more personal, the others about the city around them, but still the laughing happens. Yes, Bob.
Okay, you've got the daughters that come out have never been with a man.
Right.
What's with the son-in-laws?
Right, I don't know. So that's a question. If they've never been with a man, so there must be sons-in-law for other daughters.
Okay.
So he was offering two daughters who weren't married yet. There are other daughters who were married. That's all that we can understand from this story.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything.
Right. So it can't be the same daughters. It has to be different daughters. And we don't know how many daughters he had. Okay, and so, 15. So I just wanted to point out the laughing. Okay, Sarah laughed about the news that the angels just shared with them that she was going to become pregnant and give birth. The sons-in-law are laughing about Lot's idea that the city is going to be destroyed. Uchemo hashachar Allah, vaya'itzu hamalachim belot lemor. Kum kach et ishtecha v'et shtei venotecha hanimtzaot pen tisafeh ba'avon ha'ir. And so when dawn broke, or the sun rose, the angels urged Lot, saying, now they're called angels. They were anashim just 2 verses before, but now they're called angels. The angels urged Lot, saying, get up, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are found here. So maybe not the daughters other daughters who are with the sons-in-law. Take your 2 daughters and your wife, and lest they be swept up in the tragedy of the city or the iniquity of the city. Okay, you want to make sure they get out of town. So in other words, the sons-in-law who were laughing, it was assumed they're going to be punished for their laughter by staying in the town and being destroyed. Sarah, who laughed, that was okay. So God forgave her for her laughter. And her laughter was, she said back in chapter 18, my husband's so old and I'm going to get pregnant. And God relayed what Sarah said, like, she's too old to get pregnant. So the rabbis say something about how God changed Sarah's words, like it's okay to have a white lie in order to have peace in the home. So God didn't exactly say what Sarah said, but changed the words a little bit so that Abraham wouldn't be upset with Sarah. So again, you can look at that there. But Sarah's forgiven for laughing. And in fact, we're supposed to always remember her laughter because of Isaac. His name means laughter. So when we pray 3 times a day, we was saying Isaac's name, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov. So we're always saying Yitzchak, which is supposed to remind us of Sarah's laughter. Here, the laughter of the sons-in-laws are so bad, and so they're not forgiven at all, and they're going to be punished for their laughter by being destroyed in the town. 16. Vayit mama, vayachaziku ha'anashim biyado. So he hesitated, and there's a special trope mark above the mem there in the word vayit mama. So if you pay attention to trope marks at all, you'll notice that trope mark is very unusual. It appears only 4 times in the Torah. Okay? So the rabbis have said something about that. And the way to sing this, it emphasizes, it's a length, it takes a while to sing this trope mark as opposed to other trope marks that are quick, maybe 2 notes long. This would be like 15 notes, 16 notes long. So to emphasize then that he hesitated. So Lot hesitated, and vayachaziku ha'anashim biyado, the men, now they're called men again, not angels. The men grabbed his hand. Maybe they're men because these angels had to have physical form in order to grab his hand. Maybe as angels, they couldn't grab their hand. So they grabbed his hand and his wife's hand and the hands of his daughters. So you got 2 angels and they're grabbing 4 hands. Okay, so just think about that. Each angel has 2 hands, so it's possible that they can do that. Each one can grab one hand of Lot and one hand of a daughter, or one hand of Lot and his wife, and the other one grab the hands of the 2 daughters. But the fact that the Torah is describing how they grabbed their hands causes us to think, how did they do it? To be able to pull them out. Bechemlat Adonai alav, in God's mercy on him. Even though he was hesitating, God's having mercy on Lot by having the angels pull them anyway. Vayotziuhu, vayanichuhu michutz la'ir. And they brought him, it should be vayotzi aim, but it says vayotziuhu. So they brought him out and they left him outside the city. It should be, no, they're grabbing everybody's hands, him, his wife, and his 2 daughters. But the Hebrew says they brought him and left him outside the city. I think it wants us to understand that they brought them and left them outside the city. 17, Vayehi kahotziam otams, because now when they brought them out, hachutza, outside, vayomer, himalet al nafshecha, run for your lives. Al tabit acharecha, don't look behind you. Don't look behind you. Va'al ta'amod b'chol hakikar hahara, don't stop anywhere in the plain. Go to the hahara himalet pentisafeh, run to the hills, lest you be swept up. Okay, so that's what the angels are saying. Just go straight to the mountains. Now, if you can picture the Dead Sea, okay, picture, if you've ever been to the Dead Sea area, the mountains aren't that far, and the area by the Dead Sea is pretty flat, and running west you can run west to the mountains with Sodom and Gomorrah. So that's near the bottom of the Dead Sea today. You can run west to the mountains, that would be closer, the Judean hills, or you can run east to the hills of Jordan, or what was then Moab. Well, it wasn't Moab yet. But the hills on the other side of the Jordan would be further to run. Okay, but don't look back. That's what they're saying. Don't al tabit acharecha. Don't look back. Don't look behind you. 18. Vayomer Lot alehem al na Adonai. He says to them, Lot says to them, don't. Hine na matza avdecha chen be'enecha v'tagdel chastecha asher asita imadi lahachayot et nafshi va'anochi lo uchal lehimale tahara pentid bakani hara'a vamati. So you have found if you have found favor, if your servant has found favor in your eyes, let your mercy, your compassion be great to do with me, to keep me alive, because I can't run to the mountains. I cannot flee to the hills. Pentid bakani hara'avamati, but I might die. So in other words, we don't know how old Lot is. Lot is Abraham's nephew. Abraham at this time is about 100 years old. So how old is his nephew? Because his nephew be 80 years old. So imagine an 80-year-old man. Now, I don't know what ages were like back then and what that meant in terms of physical ability, but an 80-year-old man, it'd be hard to run. I mean, they could walk, but to run to the mountains would be really hard. So he's saying, wait, I can't run. Can you still keep me alive? 20. Hinena ha'ir hazot krova lanus shama v'hi mitzar imaltana shama halo mitzar hi utechi nafshi. So he says, he's trying to bargain with these angels. Here's the city close by. Maybe I can escape there. That city is Mitzar. It's a little place, it says, but maybe it's the name of the city is Mitzar. It's a little place. Maybe I can escape there. And let my life be saved. 21. Vayomer elav, hine nasati fanecha, gam ladavar hazeh, levilti hofki et ha'ir asher dibarta. He replied, that one angel replied, very well, I'll grant this favor to you, and I will not annihilate the town of which you have spoken. Okay, so in other words, one angel says, okay, you can escape there to that town and not to the hills, and I'll make sure that when this whole area is annihilated, you'll miraculously be safe in that little town that you're in. Maher himaleit shama kilo uchala asot davar ad boacha shama al kain kara shem ha'ir so'ar. So hurry up and get there as quickly as you can, because I won't be able to do anything. That is, I can't bring God's forces of destruction down until you get there. Therefore, the name of the place was called Soar. So Mitzar is a little place. Soar is the name of the place. Okay. Okay, and let's read a couple more verses. Hashemesh yatsa al haaretz. The sun rose upon, all this was happening at dawn. Okay, now the sun's rising. The sun rose over the earth. Velot ba tsoara. And Lot came to Tsoar. Va'adonai himtir al Sodom ve'al Amorah gofrit va'esh me'et Adonai min hashamayim. And God caused sulfur and fire to rain down upon Sodom and Gomorrah, or it says here sulfurous fire. So a match in modern Hebrew is a gofrit, and whatever is, it's called that based on the material that's on the edge of the match, the end of the match that lights up when you strike it. Okay, so that could be the sulfurous material. If you ever travel to the Dead Sea area, you can kind of smell the sulfur and the other minerals from the water in the Dead Sea and also from the ground. So God caused sulfur and fire to rain down on Sodom and Gomorrah from God from the heavens. Vayahafoch et ha'arim ha'el ve'et kol hakikar, and these cities and the whole plain were turned upside down. Ve'et kol yoshvei ha'arim v'tzemach ha'adama, and all the inhabitants of the cities and anything growing from the earth. Vatabet ishto me'acharav v'tehi netziv melach. And his wife looked behind him, so it should be vatabet ishto me'achareha. If it clearly how she looked behind her, what it says here in the Hebrew, she looked behind him. Whatever it was, she's looking back. Is it behind her or behind him? She's looking back, and the angel said, "Don't look back." She looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. So if you ever take a tour of the lower Dead Sea area where all the hotels are, so the upper Dead Sea area is where Jericho is, and south of that is where Masada is, Ein Gedi and then Masada. Way, way south of that, the southern end of the Dead Sea is where the hotels are, and depending on which tour guide you have, they'll pick one pillar of salt that happens to be on the side of the road and say, that one is Lot's wife. I remember in the 70s when my father led a tour of Israel, I remember that the tour guide saying, that's the pillar of salt. How do you remember which one is the pillar of salt? There's no plaque on it to say that here is Lot's wife, circa 1400 BCE or something like that. There's no plaque on it, but there's lots of pillars of salt in the area, and that's what happened to him, to her. Okay, we're running out of time. Let's just read two more sentences here about Abraham. Vayashkem Avraham baboker el hamakom asher amad sham et pnei Adonai. Abraham got up early in the morning and he went to the place where he had stood in talking with God. 28, Vayashkef al pnei Sodom va'amorah, and he looked out over where Sodom and Gomorrah were. Remember, he's outside of Hebron, and I guess, you could look from there. You could see the Dead Sea from Hebron. You can see the Dead Sea from Jerusalem. So further south, Hebron, you can look out over the whole expanse of the Dead Sea. He looked out over it, Val kol pnei eretz hakikar, and over the whole land of that plain. Vayar v'hine ala kitur haaretz kekitur havkivshan. And he saw that the smoke was rising from the earth like smoke from a furnace. So, in other words, this is the frame of the story, because God had said to Abraham at this place that he was standing, that if 10 righteous people were found there, then he wouldn't destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, but he is going to destroy them. And now he's seeing the destruction of that place. Right. Vayahi b'shachet Elohim et arei hakikar. And when God, this is verse 29, destroyed the cities of the plain, Vayiskor Elohim et Avraham, God remembered Abraham, Vayeshalach et Lot mitocha hafecha, and he sent, or he cast Lot out from this upheaval, like he saved him from the upheaval, bahafochet ha'arim, in the upheaval of the cities, asher yashav behen Lot, that Lot was dwelling in. So in other words, God remembered Abraham. For Abraham's sake, God saved Lot. Okay? Well, the story continues about these daughters. So Lot and his daughters, right? The wife is a pillar of salt, so she's dead. So it's the wife and the daughters. They think the whole world is destroyed. It's not just Sodom and Gomorrah. They think the whole world is destroyed. And because of how their father was willing to throw them to the men of the town, they say, well, the whole world is destroyed. What are we going to do? Let's get dad drunk, and he'll sleep with each of us, and we'll become pregnant from him. And so the nations of Ammon and Moab are descended from that incestuous relationship of drunk Lot with his daughters. Okay? So that's what we're supposed to understand from the story of Lot and his family, and how they compare to Abraham and his family. And Sarah laughs at God's promise, but nothing happens to her. The sons-in-law laugh at God's promise, and they get destroyed. So for the rabbis, the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah and the evil, and the fact that Lot and his family still lived in this evil, says a lot, the rabbis do, about what the kind of people we're supposed to be living with, and the kind of communities we're supposed to be living with. So it's a big question today. How evil does society have to get to the point where we have to say we can't live here anymore? And raises a fascinating question. Like, there were people who left America in 2016 to live someplace else because of what they were thinking America was turning into. And now, 8 years later, some people are saying the same thing. Like, I saw something on Facebook about a map of America that maybe Canada should extend its borders to include Washington, Oregon, and California, and to include New England through Maryland. That should be the new boundaries of Canada, and everything else should be America. So that's my political comment for today. But the idea is that for the rabbis, living among evil makes us evil. And so we need to stay away from that and understand what our moral and ethical, religious values are supposed to be, and make sure that we're living in a place that won't corrupt them. Okay. Have a good rest of the day, everybody.
Can I make one comment?
Yes, go ahead, Saul.
Okay, this is really not relevant, but you know how Christian missionaries like Jehovah Witnesses and Seventh-day Adventists would walk around the neighborhood and come up your driveway and try to
Yes,
convince you.
right.
Okay, so when I was younger, now I just say, no, I'm not interested. But I used to say, well, let's discuss Genesis chapter 19. They would get really nervous, and then they would start talking, and I would ask them a lot of questions, and then they just walk away.
That's funny. That's funny. Yes, right. Yeah, we haven't had people come to our door in a very, very long time. And the people are in our neighborhood and they're walking around sometimes. Neighbors tell us that the Mormons or Jehovah's Witnesses have come to their door, but for some reason they haven't come to our door. So, yeah,
Maybe I got them to go away. I don't
yeah,
know.
that's right. That's right. Okay, folks, have a good rest of the day. Take care.